The rusted shell of what was once a magnificent 1967 Ford Mustang sat forgotten in the corner of Jimmy's salvage yard, its once proud curves now telling a story of neglect and abandonment. Most people walk past it without a second glance, seeing only twisted metal and shattered dreams. But Sarah Martinez saw something different entirely. She never thought a casual Saturday morning browse through car parts would change her life forever. The sound of gravel crunching under her boots echoed through the salvage yard as she wandered between rows of forgotten vehicles, each one a story waiting to be told. But when her eyes landed on that particular Mustang, something deep inside her chest stirred to life. What Sarah didn't know, what nobody in the small town of Cedar Creek knew, was that this car carried a secret that had been buried for over 30 years. A secret so powerful that when its original owner finally tracked it down, he would risk everything to get it back. They thought Sarah was just another young woman with restoration dreams, but they were about to discover that some bonds between person and machine run deeper than anyone could imagine. The morning mist clings to the metal graveyard of Jimmy's Auto Salvage, where the gentle sound of wind through broken windows creates a symphony of forgotten memories. Sarah Martinez stands at the entrance, her breath visible in the crisp morning air. At 28, she moves with the confidence of someone who has spent their entire life around engines and chrome, checking her phone for the address one more time before stepping through the gate. She's been searching for months now, driving to every salvage yard within 100 miles, looking for the perfect project car, something she can restore from the ground up. Something that will prove to everyone, including herself, that she can build something beautiful from nothing. The failures of her past relationships and career setbacks have left her feeling like she needs to create something lasting, something real. The rows of cars stretch out before her like metal tombstones, each one marking the end of someone's dream. But Sarah isn't here to mourn. She's here to resurrect. Jimmy Thompson emerges from the cluttered office, his weathered face creased with the lines of 40 years in the salvage business. He wipes his greasy hands on an equally greasy rag as he approaches, sizing up this young woman who clearly knows her way around automotive graveyards. "Looking for anything particular?" Jimmy asks, his voice carrying the gruff kindness of someone who's helped thousands of dreamers find their perfect project. 1965 to 1970 Mustang, Sarah replies, her eyes already scanning the yard. Something with good bones, doesn't matter what it looks like on the surface. Jimmy chuckles, a sound like grinding gears. "Lady, I like your attitude. Most folks come in here wanting something that's already half restored. Come on, let me show you what I got." They walk deeper into the yard, past Chevelles and Camaros, past pickup trucks that haven't seen pavement in decades. The morning sun breaks through the clouds, casting dramatic shadows between the vehicles. Sarah's heart races with each potential candidate, but nothing feels quite right. Then they round the corner near the back fence, and there it is. The Mustang shell sits alone, almost hidden behind a rusted school bus and a pile of tires. Its blue paint has faded to a ghostly pale, with rust eating through the quarters and rocker panels. The windows are gone, the interior is completely stripped, and the engine bay stands empty like a hollow chest cavity. But Sarah sees past all of that. She sees the perfect proportions, the classic fastback silhouette, the way the light catches the curves despite the decay. This car has presence, even in its broken state. 1967 fastback, Sarah says, following her gaze. Been sitting here about 8 years now. Previous owner brought it in, said he was coming back for it. Never did. Sarah approaches the car like it's a wounded animal, her fingers tracing the outline of the door handle. The metal is cold beneath her touch, but something about it feels alive. She peers inside, noting the solid floor pans beneath years of debris. "What happened to it?" she asks, walking around the perimeter, her trained eye cataloging every dent and rust spot.
Before we begin, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story.
Jimmy scratches his gray beard thoughtfully. Story goes, young guy owned it back in the 80s. Some kind of family emergency made him sell it quick. Guy who bought it from him started a restoration, then ran out of money. That's when it ended up here. Sarah opens the hood, or what's left of it. The engine bay is remarkably clean despite the years of exposure. She runs her hands along the shock towers, checking for damage. Everything seems solid, restorable. "How much?" she asks, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. Jimmy looks at the car, then at Sarah, then back at the car. "Honestly, I've been trying to get rid of this thing for years. $700 and it's yours. That includes the title." $700. Sarah had budgeted for 3 times that amount. The price seems almost too good to be true, but she's learned to trust her instincts about cars. Sometimes the best deals come from the most unlikely places. "Deal," she says, extending her hand to Jimmy. As they shake on it, a cloud passes over the sun, casting the salvage yard in sudden shadow. For just a moment, Sarah feels a chill that has nothing to do with the weather. It's as if the car itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next. Back at Jimmy's office, Sarah fills out the paperwork while he searches through filing cabinets for the title. The office is a museum of automotive history, with calendars from the 1980s still hanging on the walls and parts catalogs stacked ceiling high. "Here we go," Jimmy says, pulling out a manila folder. "Title's clean, previous owners signed it over properly. Name was..." He squints at the faded signature. "Robert Hayes. Address in Phoenix." Sarah copies down the information more out of curiosity than anything else. She likes to know the history of her projects, the stories behind the rust and wear. It helps guide her restoration decisions. "Funny thing about that car," Jimmy continues, settling into his creaky desk chair, "always gave me an odd feeling, like it was waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" "For someone like you, I suppose. Someone who could see past what it is now to what it could be again." Sarah finishes the paperwork and hands over 7 crisp $100 bills. Jimmy counts them twice, then stamps the title with today's date. Just like that, the 1967 Mustang belongs to her. "You'll need a trailer to haul it. Know anyone with a car hauler?" "My brother Marcus has one. He should be here within an hour." While they wait, Sarah returns to the car for a more thorough inspection. In daylight, the project seems even more daunting. The body will need significant metalwork. The entire interior must be rebuilt from scratch, and who knows what surprises await once she starts digging deeper. But that's exactly what she wants. A complete ground-up restoration that will test every skill she's learned over 15 years of working on cars. Her father had taught her to see potential where others saw problems, and this Mustang has potential in abundance. Marcus Martinez pulls into the salvage yard right on time, his diesel pickup truck trailing a flatbed car hauler. He's 3 years older than Sarah and built like the construction foreman he is, all broad shoulders and calloused hands. But when it comes to automotive knowledge, he readily admits his little sister knows more than he ever will. "Let me guess," Marcus says, climbing out of his truck. "You found another project that's going to take over your entire garage." "This one's different," Sarah insists, leading him to the Mustang. "Look at those lines, that stance. This is a real muscle car, not some grocery getter." Marcus walks around the car slowly, his experienced eye noting the extensive work ahead. "Sarah, this thing is basically a shell. You're talking about a complete frame-off restoration." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," she replies, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that comes from years of turning wrenches. "I've got the skills, I've got the time, and now I've got the perfect car."
Jimmy helps them load the Mustang onto the trailer, the winch straining against the weight of the shell. As they secure it with chains and straps, Sarah feels a surge of excitement mixed with nervous energy. This is really happening. After months of searching, she's finally found her dream project. The drive back to Sarah's house takes 30 minutes, the Mustang riding behind them like a promise of things to come. Sarah lives in a modest ranch house on the outskirts of Cedar Creek, chosen specifically for its large detached garage. The 2-car garage has been converted into a workshop, complete with a lift, air compressor, and enough tools to handle any automotive challenge. Marcus backs the trailer up to the garage door, positioning it perfectly for unloading. Together, they winch the Mustang off the trailer and into the garage, where it settles onto jack stands like it belongs there. All right, Marcus says, wiping his hands on a shop rag. What's the plan? Sarah circles the car slowly, her mind already working through the restoration sequence. First, complete disassembly. I need to catalog every part, see what can be saved and what needs to be replaced. Then bodywork, then paint, then reassembly. What about the engine? 327 small block Ford, built for torque. I've already got one in mind at a machine shop in Dallas. It'll be perfect once I have it rebuilt to spec. Marcus nods approvingly. His sister's thoroughness is legendary in their family. When Sarah takes on a project, she sees it through to completion, no matter how long it takes. Need any help getting started? Thanks, but this is something I need to do myself, at least the initial work. After Marcus leaves, Sarah stands alone in her garage with her new acquisition. The space is quiet, except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. She spent countless hours in this garage, but tonight feels different. Tonight marks the beginning of something significant. She places her hand on the Mustang's roof, feeling the cool metal beneath her palm. Somewhere in the layers of rust and neglect lies one of America's most iconic muscle cars, waiting to be reborn. It won't be easy, complete restorations never are, but Sarah has learned that the best things in life require patience, skill, and unwavering determination. The next morning arrives gray and overcast, matching Sarah's mood as she prepares for her first full day with the Mustang. She's taken a week off from her job at the local auto parts store to focus entirely on the project. Her savings account can handle the time off, and her boss understands her passion for restoration work. She starts with photography, documenting every angle and detail before she begins disassembly. These photos will be invaluable later when she's trying to remember how everything goes back together. Her digital camera clicks steadily as she works her way around the car, capturing both the damage and the remaining original details. Under the front fender, her camera flash illuminates something unexpected. There, etched in the metal in small neat letters, are the initials RH plus ML surrounded by a heart. The etching is old, done with care rather than vandalism. Someone had wanted to mark this car with their love story. Sarah traces the letters with her finger, wondering about the people behind the initials. RH must be Robert Hayes, the name on the title. But who was ML? And what happened to their story? The discovery adds another layer to the car's mystery. This wasn't just someone's transportation, it was someone's dream, someone's romance, someone's precious possession. The weight of that responsibility settles on Sarah's shoulders as she continues her documentation. By afternoon, she's begun the disassembly process in earnest. Years of rust have fused some bolts, requiring penetrating oil and patience. But slowly, methodically, the Mustang begins to reveal its secrets. Hidden beneath the decay, the underlying structure appears solid. Previous owners had clearly cared about this car, protecting it from the worst of time's ravages.
She's removing the passenger door when she notices something odd. The inner door panel has been carefully sealed with weatherproof tape, as if protecting something inside. Most restorers would have removed such modifications years ago, but this tape looks intentional, purposeful. Curiosity overcoming caution, Sarah carefully peels back the tape. Inside the door panel, wrapped in plastic and duct tape, is a small metal box. Her heart pounds as she extracts it from its hiding place, noting how carefully it had been concealed. The box is old but well preserved, about the size of a paperback book. There's no lock, just a simple latch that opens with a soft click. Inside, Sarah finds a collection of items that tell a story she never expected. Photographs, dozens of them, showing the Mustang in its prime. A young man with kind eyes and shoulder-length hair poses beside the gleaming blue fastback. In many photos, he's joined by a beautiful young woman with a radiant smile. These must be RH and ML, the names etched under the fender. But the photographs tell more than just a love story. They show the car at drag strips, at car shows, at what appears to be informal racing events. This Mustang wasn't just a cruiser, it was a serious performance machine. Beneath the photos, Sarah finds documents.
registration papers, insurance records, and receipts for performance modifications. The young man had invested serious money in this car, turning it into something special. But what catches Sarah's attention most is a letter, handwritten on notebook paper and carefully folded. The letter is addressed to whoever finds this and dated 32 years ago. Sarah unfolds it carefully, the paper brittle with age. The handwriting is neat, masculine, urgent. If you're reading this, it means I had to leave the car behind. My name is Robert Hayes, and this Mustang was everything to me. More than just a car, it was my freedom, my pride, my connection to the woman I loved. I'm hiding this letter because I believe someday I'll be back for it. The car holds memories that can't be replaced, moments that shaped who I am. If circumstances have brought you into possession of this car, please know that it was loved. Every modification, every mile, every moment was precious. I hope it brings you the same joy it brought me. Take care of it. It deserves better than what I was forced to give it. The letter is signed simply Robert Hayes, with a phone number that's been crossed out and replaced with another one, then another. Someone who had moved frequently, perhaps running from something. Sarah sits back on her heels, the letter trembling in her hands. This isn't just a car she's bought, it's someone's life, someone's dreams, someone's unfinished business. The weight of responsibility feels heavier now, more personal. She photographs the letter and the box's contents before carefully storing everything in her house. The restoration continues, but now it carries additional meaning. She's not just rebuilding a car, she's preserving someone's legacy. Days pass in a rhythm of discovery and disassembly. Each component removed reveals more clues about the Mustang's past. The engine mounts show signs of multiple power plant swaps. The suspension has been carefully modified for performance. Every bolt, every bracket tells part of the story. Sarah finds herself staying later in the garage each night, driven by curiosity as much as restoration fever. Who was Robert Hayes? What emergency forced him to abandon his beloved car? And why did he seem so certain he would return for it? That evening, unable to concentrate on anything else, Sarah decides to try and track down Robert Hayes. The letter mentioned Phoenix, and Jimmy had confirmed that address. With modern internet resources, finding someone shouldn't be impossible. Her laptop search yields surprising results. Robert Hayes appears in several automotive forums, usually discussing classic Mustang restoration. His posts show deep knowledge and obvious passion for the cars, but the posts stop abruptly about 5 years ago with no explanation.
Further searching reveals a more troubling pattern. Robert Hayes had been active in veterans organizations, specifically groups supporting veterans with PTSD. His forum signatures often included phrases about finding peace through restoration and healing through mechanical therapy. Sarah leans back in her desk chair, pieces of a larger story beginning to emerge. A young veteran, perhaps struggling with issues from military service, finds solace in his Mustang. Something happens that forces him to sell it quickly. For 30 years, he's been trying to find his way back to it. The responsibility she feels grows heavier. This isn't just about restoration anymore. It's about reuniting someone with a piece of their soul they've been missing for 3 decades. Sarah prints out the most recent address she can find for Robert Hayes, a veterans facility outside Phoenix. The address is 2 years old, but it's the best lead she has. She stares at the printout, debating her next move. Part of her wants to reach out immediately, to let Robert know his Mustang has been found by someone who understands its significance. But another part worries about raising false hope, about promising something she might not be able to deliver. The restoration work continues, but now with additional purpose. Every careful repair, every preserved original detail matters more because she knows how much this car means to its original owner.
Sarah finds herself working with extra care, treating each component like the treasure it is to someone else. 2 weeks into the project, while stripping paint from the rear quarter panel, Sarah hears an unfamiliar sound in her driveway. It's not Marcus's truck or any of her neighbor's vehicles. The engine note is older, rougher, like something that's traveled many hard miles. She sets down her sander and walks to the garage door, peering through the small window. An old pickup truck sits in her driveway, its paint faded and travel-worn. Behind the wheel sits a man she doesn't recognize, but something about him seems familiar. The man climbs slowly, moving with the careful deliberation of someone much older than his years suggest. He's tall and thin, with graying hair and eyes that hold a sadness Sarah recognizes from her own mirror during difficult times. He wears faded jeans and a worn military jacket, and in his weathered hands he holds a set of keys. Sarah's heart stops as she realizes what she's looking at. Those keys, that bearing, that unmistakable sense of loss and hope combined. This is Robert Hayes, and somehow, after 32 years, he's found his way back to his Mustang. He stands in her driveway for a long moment, staring at the garage door that conceals his past. His hands shake slightly as he grips the keys, and Sarah can see him gathering courage for whatever he's about to say. This is the moment everything changes, the moment when a simple restoration project becomes something much larger, much more important. Sarah takes a deep breath and opens the garage door, knowing that what happens next will alter both their lives forever. The afternoon sun streams into the garage, illuminating the partially dismantled Mustang like a spotlight on stage. Robert Hayes looks at his car for the first time in over 30 decades, and Sarah watches as 30 years of loss and longing play across his weathered face. The silence stretches between them like a bridge, spanning 32 years of separation. Robert Hayes stands motionless in Sarah's driveway, his weathered hands gripping the keys so tightly his knuckles have gone white. Sarah watches as emotions cascade across his face. Recognition, disbelief, something that looks like grief mixed with desperate hope. "That's my car," he says finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's really my car." Sarah steps forward slowly, her own heart pounding with the weight of this moment. "Mr. Hayes? Robert Hayes from Phoenix?" His eyes snap to hers, surprise replacing the wonder. "How do you know my name?" Instead of answering immediately, Sarah disappears into the garage and returns with the small metal box she'd found hidden in the door panel. Robert's face goes pale when he sees it, and his free hand reaches out instinctively before stopping mid-air. "You found it," he breathes. "After all these years, you actually found it?" Sarah opens the box carefully, revealing the photographs and the letter inside. "I found this when I started the restoration. Your letter said you believed you'd come back for the car someday." Robert stares at the contents of the box as if seeing ghosts made manifest. His eyes linger on the photographs of himself and the beautiful young woman, and Sarah sees his jaw tighten with old pain. "I never stopped looking," he admits, his voice thick with emotion. 32 years, and I never stopped trying to find it. When I saw your online posts about the restoration, I knew. Even from the partial photos, I could tell it was mine." "Online posts?" Sarah's confusion is evident. "I haven't posted anything online about the car." Robert pulls out a smartphone with a cracked screen, thumbing through saved screenshots. "Automotive forum, 3 days ago. Someone posted about finding a hidden letter in a '67 Mustang fastback. You signed the post as S. Martinez, Cedar Creek, Texas." Sarah's blood runs cold. She's never posted anything on any automotive forum. Someone else has been tracking this car, watching her restoration, waiting for the right moment to act. The implications hang in the air between them like a storm cloud. Robert's expression darkens, and for the first time, Sarah sees not just the sad older man, but hints of the soldier he once was. "We need to talk," Robert says, glancing around the neighborhood with new wariness. "Somewhere private. There are things about this car, about why I had to leave it behind, that you need to know." Sarah gestures toward her house. "Come inside. And Mr. Hayes, maybe you should park your truck in the garage, just in case." They spend the next few minutes moving both vehicles into the garage, the partially restored Mustang now sharing space with Robert's worn pickup truck. As they close the garage door, Sarah notices Robert checking the locks with practiced efficiency. In her kitchen, Sarah makes coffee while Robert sits at the table, his hands wrapped around the metal box like it contains the most precious things on earth. The silence between them feels heavy with unspoken history. "The letter you wrote," Sarah begins, setting a mug in front of him. "You mentioned an emergency that forced you to sell the car. What happened?" Robert takes a long sip of coffee, buying time before he speaks. When he finally meets her eyes, the weight of 30 decades of secrets is visible in his gaze. 1992, he begins slowly. "I was 24, just back from Desert Storm. Had my discharge papers and enough saved up to buy that Mustang from the original owner. It was my dream car, my therapy, my way of dealing with what I'd seen over there." Sarah settles into the chair across from him, recognizing the careful way he's choosing his words. She's heard similar hesitation from other veterans who've come into the auto parts store, men and women carrying invisible wounds. "The car became everything to me. Weekends at the drag strip, evenings working on modifications, road trips with—" His voice catches slightly. "With Margaret Lynn, ML, from the initials under the fender."
Your girlfriend? My fiancée. We were going to be married that fall. The Mustang was supposed to be our wedding car, decorated with flowers and trailing cans down Main Street. Robert's smile is bitter with memory. We had it all planned out. Sarah waits patiently as Robert gathers himself to continue. Outside, a dog barks in the distance, and she realizes how isolated her house feels suddenly, how far from the main road they are. Margaret worked at the bank downtown, First National of Cedar Creek. Sweet girl, believed the best of everyone. That's what made her such an easy target. Target for what? Robert's hands tightened around the coffee mug. Her supervisor, David Kellerman, was embezzling from the bank. Small amounts at first, but over time it added up to over $200,000. When the audit started getting close, he needed a fall guy. Sarah begins to understand where this is heading, and the pit of her stomach grows cold. Margaret had access to the accounts Kellerman was stealing from. He'd been setting her up for months, making sure transactions went through her terminal, forging her signatures on transfer authorizations. When the investigation started, all the evidence pointed to her. But surely she could prove her innocence. Robert's laugh is devoid of humor. You'd think so. But Kellerman was smart. He'd been planning his exit strategy for over a year. By the time the theft was discovered, he'd created a paper trail that made Margaret look guilty beyond doubt. Sarah leans forward, completely absorbed in the story. What happened to her? My composure finally cracks, and tears he's held back for over 30 years begin to fall. Official ruling was suicide. Supposedly hung herself in her cell Sunday night. Couldn't face the shame of what she'd done. But you don't believe that. Margaret was the strongest person I knew. She would never have taken her own life, especially not when she was innocent. She was murdered, Sarah. Killed because she could have exposed Kellerman's real involvement. The coffee grows cold between them as Robert continues his story. Sarah finds herself gripping her own mug, needing something solid to hold on to as the tale unfolds. I tried to fight it, demanded an investigation, hired what lawyers I could afford, made noise with anyone who would listen. But Kellerman had connections, money, influence. The official story stuck, and I was just a grieving veteran who couldn't accept the truth. So you left town? Not by choice. 3 weeks after Margaret's funeral, men came to my apartment, never identified themselves, but they made it clear that continuing to ask questions about Margaret's death would be very bad for my health. They threatened you? They made more than threaten. Showed me photos of my parents' house, my sister's workplace, places I'd never mentioned to anyone. Made it clear that my family would pay the price if I didn't disappear. So you sold the car? Robert nods miserably. Had to liquidate everything fast. The Mustang was my most valuable possession, but I couldn't take it with me. Too recognizable, too easy to track. I sold it to the first buyer who showed up with cash, some guy who said he wanted to restore it. But you hid the letter and the keys first. Last-minute decision. I knew someday I'd want to come back, want to reclaim that piece of my life with Margaret. The letter was my way of maintaining hope that it wasn't really goodbye forever. Sarah processes this information, trying to understand the implications. Mr. Hayes, if what you're saying is true, then whoever posted about finding your letter online is probably connected to the same people who forced me to leave town 32 years ago, Robert finishes grimly, which means they've been watching the car all this time, waiting for something. Waiting for what? Robert reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a small leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. He opens the journal carefully, revealing pages of meticulous handwriting interspersed with photocopied bank documents. Margaret wasn't just an innocent victim. She was investigating the embezzlement on her own, documenting everything she found. Sarah stares at the journal, understanding beginning to dawn. She was building a case against Kellerman.
More than that, she discovered that Kellerman wasn't working alone. The embezzlement was part of a larger money laundering operation involving local politicians, business owners, even law enforcement. Margaret had stumbled onto something massive.
And she told you about it?
She was scared, didn't know who else to trust. The night before she was arrested, she gave me this journal and made me promise to keep it safe. Said if anything happened to her, I should make sure the truth came out. Sarah looks at the journal with new understanding.
That's why they forced you to leave. They thought you had evidence that could expose them.
But I was young, scared, grieving. I ran instead of fighting. For 32 years, I've carried the guilt of not avenging Margaret, not exposing the truth about what really happened to her.
And now?
Robert's expression hardens with resolve. Now I'm 64 years old, I've got nothing left to lose, and I'm tired of running. Someone posted about finding my letter because they wanted to draw me out. Well, here I am. The sound of a car door slamming in the driveway freezes both of them mid-conversation. Sarah moves to the kitchen window and peeks through the blinds, her heart sinking at what she sees. A black sedan sits in her driveway, and 2 men in expensive suits are walking toward her front door. They move with the practiced efficiency of professionals, and something about their bearing sets off every alarm bell in Sarah's head.
Mr. Hayes, she whispers urgently, we have company.
Robert moves to look over her shoulder, and she feels intense when he sees the men. 32 years, and they still look exactly the same. Different faces, same type. The doorbell rings, a pleasant chime that somehow sounds ominous in the current circumstances. Sarah and Robert exchange glances, both understanding that this moment has been building for over 3 decades. "Back door?" Robert asks quietly. Sarah shakes her head. "They'll have someone watching it. Besides, I'm not running. This is my house, my car now, and I want answers." Robert looks at her with something approaching admiration.
You don't understand what you're dealing with. These people have killed before." "Maybe, but they're also getting older, and their secrets are getting harder to keep. Maybe it's time someone called their bluff." The doorbell rings again, more insistent this time. Sarah takes a deep breath, tucks the journal inside her jacket, and walks toward the front door. Robert follows close behind, his military bearing returning as he prepares for whatever comes next. Sarah opens the door to find two men who look like they stepped out of a government thriller. The older one, perhaps 55, has silver hair and cold blue eyes. His younger companion is built like an athlete, with the kind of alertness that suggests military or law enforcement background. "Ms. Martinez," the older man says, with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "My name is David Thornton. This is my associate, Mr. Collins. We represent certain interests that have a long-standing claim on that particular vehicle. We'd like to discuss purchasing it from you." "I'm not interested in selling." Thornton's smile widens slightly. "Perhaps we could come in and discuss the matter more thoroughly. I think you'll find our offer quite generous. And I think you'll find my answer quite final. The car isn't for sale." Robert steps into view behind Sarah, and she feels the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Thornton's pleasant facade slips for just a moment, revealing something much darker underneath. "Mr. Hayes," Thornton says, his voice taking on a different tone entirely. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough, Thornton, though I see you're still intimidating civilians and covering up murders." Collins steps forward slightly, his hand moving inside his jacket. "This doesn't have to be difficult." "You're right," Sarah says firmly. "It doesn't. You can leave my property right now, or I can call the sheriff and explain how two strangers are threatening me at my own front door." "Ms. Martinez," Thornton's voice carries a warning now, "you're involving yourself in matters you don't understand. That car contains certain items that belong to our organization, items that were stolen 32 years ago." "You mean evidence of murder and embezzlement?" Sarah shoots back. "Evidence that proves you killed an innocent woman to cover up your crimes?" The pretense finally drops completely. Thornton's face hardens into something genuinely menacing. "You have something that belongs to us. We're prepared to compensate you generously for its return."
And if I refuse? Collins answers by pulling back his jacket enough to reveal a holstered pistol. Then we'll be forced to consider alternative approaches to resolving this situation. Robert moves slightly in front of Sarah, his own stance shifting into something that suggests years of combat training. "You made the mistake of threatening her. That changes everything." "Does it?" Thornton's confidence seems unshaken. "You're both alone here, miles from town, with no witnesses. Accidents happen to people who possess dangerous information." But Sarah smiles, and something in her expression makes both men pause. "Actually, gentlemen, you're wrong about one thing. We're not alone." The sound of vehicles approaching from multiple directions reaches them all at the same time. Through the front windows, they can see police cars, sheriff's vehicles, and what appears to be federal law enforcement converging on the property. Thornton's face goes white. "What did you do?" "What Margaret Lynn would have done 32 years ago if she'd had the chance. I called for backup." The next few minutes unfold in a blur of activity. Law enforcement officers surround the property, while Thornton and Collins find themselves with their hands zip-tied behind their backs. Sheriff Williams, a man Sarah has known since childhood, coordinates with federal agents whose badges identify them as FBI. Miss Martinez, Agent Chen approaches with a concerned expression. "Are you and Mr. Hayes all right?" "We're fine, though I think Mr. Hayes has some information you're going to find very interesting." Robert produces Margaret's journal from his jacket, handling it like the precious evidence it is. Agent Chen, this journal contains documentation of a money laundering operation that's been running for over 30 years. It also contains proof that Margaret Lin was murdered to prevent her from exposing it. Agent Chen accepts the journal with gloved hands, already calling for evidence technicians. Mr. Hayes, we've been investigating certain financial irregularities in this area for several months. Your call yesterday provided the final pieces we needed. Sarah looks at Robert in surprise. You called the FBI yesterday? After I found out about the online post, supposedly from you, I realized someone was using the car to draw me out, and I decided it was time to stop running. Robert's expression is grim but determined. Margaret deserved justice. It just took me 32 years to find the courage to fight for it. As Thornton and Collins are loaded into federal transport vehicles, Thornton catches Sarah's eye through the window. His expression promises that this isn't over, that there are others who will come looking for what she now possesses. But Sarah meets his gaze steadily. No longer the same woman who had simply wanted to restore a classic car. She's become something else entirely, a guardian of truth, a protector of justice, and the inheritor of a responsibility she never sought, but now gladly accepts. Agent Chen returns with the journal after a preliminary examination. Miss Martinez, Mr. Hayes, this investigation is going to take months to fully resolve. In the meantime, that Mustang is going to remain a target for anyone else involved in this conspiracy. Let them come, Sarah says with quiet confidence. Mr. Hayes and I aren't running anymore. Robert looks at her with deep respect. Margaret would have liked you. She never backed down from a fight either. As the law enforcement vehicles pull away, taking their prisoners and beginning a process that will unravel decades of corruption, Sarah and Robert stand in her driveway looking at the garage that contains the Mustang. The car that had started as a simple restoration project has become something much more significant, a catalyst for justice, a bridge between past and present, and a promise that some wrongs can eventually be made right. So what happens now? Sarah asks as they walk back toward the garage. Now, Robert says, pulling out the original keys he's carried for 32 years, we finish what Margaret started. We restore that car properly, and we make sure her memory gets the honor it deserves. Sarah nods, understanding that the real restoration work is just beginning, not just of the Mustang, but of justice, truth, and the promise that some bonds between people and their dreams are too strong to be broken by violence or time. The garage door closes behind them, and for the first time in over 30 decades, Robert Hayes is home.
The next 3 weeks passed in a strange mixture of intense federal investigation and focused restoration work. Agent Chen had stationed protective surveillance around Sarah's property, but both she and Robert had insisted on continuing their work on the Mustang. The car had waited 32 years for justice. It deserved to be completed properly. Sarah found herself working alongside Robert with an ease that surprised them both. His knowledge of the car's original specifications, combined with her restoration skills, created a partnership that seemed almost destined. Every bolt they turned, every piece they carefully restored, felt like an act of defiance against those who had tried to bury the truth. Margaret would have loved this, Robert said one afternoon, as they carefully fitted new quarter panels. She always said cars had souls, that you could feel their history in the metal. Sarah paused in her work, studying Robert's profile as he spoke.
Over the weeks, she'd learned to read the subtle changes in his expression when he talked about his lost fiancée. The raw grief had softened into something deeper, more peaceful. "Tell me about her," Sarah said, setting down her tools. "Not about what happened to her, but about who she was." Robert's smile was genuine for the first time since she'd known him. She was fearless, not reckless, just completely unafraid of doing what was right, even when it was difficult. She'd see injustice and couldn't walk away from it. He ran his hand along the Mustang's freshly repaired fender. "She loved this car almost as much as I did. Spent hours with me working on it, learning about engines and transmissions. Said if we were going to be married, she needed to understand what made me tick." Sarah found herself smiling at the image. "Sounds like she understood you pretty well. Better than I understood myself sometimes." Robert's expression grew thoughtful. "She used to say that some things were worth fighting for, even if the fight seemed impossible. I wish I'd remembered that 32 years ago." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Agent Chen, whose expression carried news that was clearly significant. She climbed out of her government sedan with the purposeful stride of someone who'd been working around the clock. "We need to talk, both of you. What we've uncovered goes much deeper than anyone anticipated." They gathered in Sarah's kitchen, the now familiar setting for revelations that seemed to grow more serious each time. Agent Chen spread a series of photographs and documents across the table, each one marking another piece of a puzzle that had taken decades to assemble. "Thornton and Collins have been very cooperative since their arrest," Chen began. "Apparently, facing federal racketeering charges has a way of loosening tongues. What they've told us has blown this case wide open." Sarah studied the photographs, recognizing some faces from local newspapers over the years. These are all local people, business owners, politicians, former mayor, current city council members, the previous sheriff, 3 bank presidents, and a federal judge, Chen confirmed. What Margaret Lynn discovered 32 years ago wasn't just embezzlement. It was the beginning of a systematic corruption network that's been operating in this region for over 30 years. Robert leaned forward, his jaw tightening. How many people knew what really happened to Margaret? More than we initially thought. The embezzlement at First National was just the seed money for a much larger operation. They've been laundering money for drug cartels, skimming from federal infrastructure projects, even manipulating local elections. "And they killed Margaret to protect all of this?" Sarah's voice carried a mixture of anger and disbelief. Margaret's investigation had uncovered the connection between the bank theft and several city council contracts that had been awarded to companies that didn't exist. She was 3 days away from presenting evidence to the state attorney general when she was arrested. Chen pulled out another document, this one bearing official letterheads. "We found this in Margaret's personal effects that were returned to her family after her death. Her parents kept everything, hoping someday someone would ask the right questions." Sarah read the letter aloud. "To the Texas State Attorney General, I am writing to report massive corruption involving city officials in Cedar Creek. Evidence suggests," she looked up at Robert, "she was going to expose everything." "Which is exactly why they had to stop her," Robert said grimly, "and why they wanted me gone. They couldn't be sure what she told me or what evidence I might have." Agent Chen nodded. "But here's what they didn't know, what we've just discovered. Margaret was smarter than any of them realized. She didn't just document the crimes she found, she created an insurance policy." "What kind of insurance policy?" Chen pulled out a manila envelope, handling it like it contained explosives. "After Thornton and Collins started talking, we obtained search warrants for several properties connected to the investigation. Yesterday, we found this in a safety deposit box registered under Margaret Lynn's name." Sarah opened the envelope carefully, revealing a collection of items that made her breath catch. Bank records, photographs, audio cassettes, and a letter addressed simply, "To whoever finds this."
She recorded conversations, Robert said in amazement, studying the cassette labels. Margaret recorded her supervisors discussing the embezzlement. More than that, Chen corrected. She recorded city council meetings that were supposed to be private, phone calls between bank officials and contractors, even conversations with the sheriff about covering up irregularities in financial audits. Sarah picked up the letter and read Margaret's words written 32 years ago. If something happens to me, these recordings prove that corruption goes to the highest levels of Cedar Creek government. The people responsible must be held accountable, not just for theft, but for betraying the trust of an entire community. The weight of Margaret's foresight settled over them all. Even facing death, she'd continued to fight for justice, creating a legacy that would eventually bring down those who'd killed her. There's more, Chen continued. The safety deposit box also contained instructions for finding additional evidence. Margaret had hidden documents in locations throughout the city, creating a trail that would eventually lead to the truth. And one of those locations, Robert said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn, was the Mustang? Chen nodded, which brings us to why we're here today. Mr. Hayes, Miss Martinez, we believe there's still evidence hidden in that car, evidence that could be the final piece needed to close this case completely. They returned to the garage with new purpose. The Mustang sat on jack stands, looking more like its former self with each day of work, but now they approached it with the knowledge that it might contain secrets beyond even Margaret's journal. Where would she hide something? Sarah asked, studying the car with fresh eyes. Somewhere secure, but also somewhere meaningful. Robert walked around the car slowly, his mechanic's eye noting every detail. Margaret helped me install the new transmission that summer. We spent hours working in the tunnel, modifying the floor for better clearance. Sarah grabbed a flashlight and crawled under the car, examining the transmission tunnel with careful attention. Her light caught something that didn't belong, a small metal plate that had been welded over what appeared to be an access hole. "Robert, come look at this." He joined her under the car, and together they studied the modification. The metalwork was skilled but clearly added after the car's original construction. Around the edges of the plate, someone had carefully engraved the letters ML plus RH forever. She hid something in the transmission tunnel, Robert breathed. Something she wanted to make sure only we would find. Working carefully with cutting tools, they removed the plate to reveal a waterproof container nestled inside the tunnel. Sarah extracted it with trembling hands, knowing they were about to uncover Margaret Lynn's final gift to the world. Inside the container, they found items that made Agent Chen's eyes widen with professional excitement. Financial records spanning decades, photographs of secret meetings, and most damning of all, a detailed map showing the locations of every piece of evidence Margaret had hidden throughout Cedar Creek. She was building a case that could bring down the entire network, not just the people involved 32 years ago, but everyone who joined the conspiracy since then. Among the papers was a personal letter to Robert, written in Margaret's careful handwriting. Sarah handed it to him, understanding that this was a private moment between a man and the memory of the woman he'd loved. Robert read silently, tears streaming down his weathered face. When he finished, he looked up at Sarah and Agent Chen with an expression of profound peace. She says she knew they were going to kill her, but she wasn't afraid because she knew the truth would eventually come out. She trusted that someone good would find the car, find the evidence, and finish what she started. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with an urgent message. After reading it, she looked up with barely contained excitement. "Based on the evidence you've found, the task force just executed simultaneous arrests across 3 counties. We've taken down the entire network." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity.
Federal agents, state investigators, and journalists descended on Cedar Creek as the scope of the corruption became clear. 32 years of systematic theft, fraud, and cover-ups were finally being exposed to the light.
Sarah and Robert watched the news coverage from her living room, seeing familiar faces being led away in handcuffs. Among them was Judge Harrison, who had ruled Margaret's death a suicide all those years ago. The current mayor, 2 city council members, and the president of the bank that had replaced First National were all part of the same network that had killed Margaret Lynn. "She did it," Robert said softly, his eyes fixed on the television screen. "Margaret brought them all down." "You did it too," Sarah reminded him, "by keeping her journal safe, by never giving up, by finally having the courage to come forward." "We did it," Robert corrected. "All of us. You, me, Margaret's memory, even the car itself. Some fights are too big for one person, but together." The doorbell interrupted them, and Sarah opened it to find a familiar face. Marcus stood on her porch, his expression a mixture of concern and amazement. "Sarah, I've been watching the news. Are you okay? They're saying you helped expose some massive corruption conspiracy?" She invited her brother in and spent the next hour explaining everything that had happened. Marcus listened with growing amazement as the story unfolded, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. "So let me get this straight," Marcus said finally. "You bought a car for $700 and it ended up bringing down a criminal network that's been operating for over 30 years? Sometimes the most important things come disguised as the most ordinary," Sarah replied, glancing toward the garage where the Mustang waited. "I thought I was just buying a project car. Turns out I was buying a piece of history." 2 months later, the Mustang was complete. Sarah and Robert had worked tirelessly to restore it to its original glory, but with modern improvements that made it both historically accurate and mechanically sound. The blue paint gleamed like deep water, the chrome sparkled in the sunlight, and the 327 engine purred with perfect timing. The car made its public debut at the Cedar Creek Memorial Day Parade, driving slowly down Main Street with Robert at the wheel and Sarah in the passenger seat. In the back seat rode a framed photograph of Margaret Lynn, finally receiving the honor she deserved. The crowd lined the streets, many of them people whose lives had been touched by the corruption that was finally being rooted out. City employees who'd lost their jobs to nepotism, small business owners who'd been shut out of contracts they'd rightfully won, families who'd paid inflated prices for basic services while officials lined their pockets. As they drove past First National Bank, now permanently closed pending federal investigation, Robert slowed the car to a stop. He and Sarah sat in silence for a moment, both thinking about the young woman who'd worked inside those walls and died for trying to do the right thing. "She would have loved seeing this," Robert said quietly. "She is seeing it," Sarah replied with conviction. "Every time someone stands up for truth, every time justice wins over corruption, every time good people refuse to be intimidated, she's right there." Agent Shen had arranged for a special ceremony that afternoon in the city park. A memorial bench was being dedicated to Margaret Lynn, recognizing her sacrifice and celebrating the courage that had eventually brought justice to Cedar Creek. Robert spoke at the ceremony, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. Margaret Lynn believed that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they chose to stand for what is right. She died for that belief, but her sacrifice wasn't in vain. Today we see the proof that truth, no matter how long buried, will eventually rise to the surface. Sarah found herself thinking about the strange journey that had brought them all to this moment. A $700 car purchase had become a 32-year quest for justice. A simple restoration project had become a mission to honor the memory of a woman she'd never met but had come to deeply admire. After the ceremony, Robert approached her with the Mustang's keys in his hand. He said, "I have a proposition for you. This car belongs to both of us now. What do you say we share custody?" Sarah smiled, understanding the deeper meaning behind his offer. "You mean we keep working together? Keep the story alive?" I mean, we make sure Margaret's legacy continues. Take the car to shows, tell people what really happened, and remind them that ordinary citizens have the power to fight corruption and win. She accepted the keys, knowing she was accepting much more than shared ownership of a car. She was accepting the responsibility to carry forward a story of courage, justice, and the unbreakable bond between people who refuse to give up on doing what's right. That evening, as the sun set over Cedar Creek, Sarah and Robert took the Mustang for its first real drive since the restoration. They cruised the back roads where Robert and Margaret had once driven together, the engine's rumble echoing across fields that had witnessed decades of hidden corruption and finally triumphant justice. "You know what Margaret would say if she could see us now?" Robert asked as they pulled into Sarah's driveway. "What's that?" "She'd say the car found exactly the right people at exactly the right time. She always believed things happened for a reason." Sarah turned off the engine and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the cooling metal tick and settle. Around them, Cedar Creek was beginning the long process of healing from decades of systematic corruption. New leaders were being elected, honest businesses were thriving, and citizens were rediscovering their power to hold their government accountable. The Mustang had been more than a catalyst for change. It had become a symbol of persistence, courage, and the truth that some bonds between people and principles are too strong to be broken by violence, time, or fear. As Sarah locked the garage for the night, she looked back at the car one more time. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new opportunities to share Margaret's story, new chances to remind people that ordinary individuals can achieve extraordinary things when they refuse to surrender their principles. The $700 shell had become priceless, not because of its restoration value, but because of the lives it had touched, the justice it had helped deliver, and the legacy it would carry forward for generations to come. Margaret Lynn's fight for truth had finally ended in victory, 32 years after it began. And in a small town in Texas, the power of courage over corruption had been proven once again, one carefully restored piece at a time. The story that began with a simple car purchase had become something much larger, a testament to the truth that some victories are worth waiting for. Some fights are worth finishing, and some bonds between the past and present are too powerful to be broken by anything less than justice itself. Cedar Creek would remember Margaret Lynn not as a victim, but as a hero whose courage had echoed across decades to finally set things right. And the 1967 Mustang Fastback would continue to carry her message wherever it traveled. That truth, like a well-built engine, might take time to start, but once it's running, nothing can stop it. The restoration was complete. The justice was served. The story would live forever.